don't want to waste anybody's time. So today's class is on ag water. This is a class that is typically information heavy or heavier than some of our others. We do have a bunch of slides, and I'm going to go through them as efficiently as possible. So first thing we want to start off with, when we talk about ag water, we're going to define terms. Oftentimes in FSMA language or in GAP, USDA GAP language, and other places, you will see this referred to as production water. Anytime we say ag water, production water, we're talking about the water that is basically irrigating your crop, anything that's used during the growing period. The other type of water that we would be talking about would be post-harvest water. And this is anything used during or after harvest. So not irrigation water. This is what you're actually using to rinse your product. Also, anything that you're cleaning, hands, equipment, tabletops, etc. We're talking about post-harvest water in that case. And ice. If you happen to use ice somewhere in your procedures, ice is considered to be post-harvest water. So the two distinctions, irrigation water or what we call production water, and then post-harvest water is anything basically else. In the audit, the harmonized GAP audit standard, there are several areas where water is mentioned and requires something. So we've listed it out here just to kind of give you an overview. F, remember the F is the field scope. So in each of these sections, F2, F3, F4, and F9, they're asking for something to be written in your farm plan or done as in the risk assessment. So we will take care of that for you when we talk with you in depth, particularly in the risk assessment. We'll be gathering a lot of information about your water sources, how you use water in your operation. We'll be putting that information into these various areas, the description of your water system, risk assessment, obviously talking about potential contamination from your water sources. Water management plan, that's really looking at what are you going to do if your water source is unavailable, and then if there's any water or ice used in post-harvest operations. So to go into each of these with a little bit more depth, the water system description, what we're looking for here is a very streamlined bit of information that we'll put in your farm plan that identifies your water source, talks about what fields or areas that it serves, identifies the flow, and explains the type of irrigation used, which could simply be drip or overhead or a combination. Included with this water system description, we need to have something that shows how the water flows in the system. So here's an example of what we'll be asking you to do. This is in the homework. Doesn't have to be really fancy, but essentially we just want to kind of see in the overview of your operation, which direction is water going. So something simple like a Google map that you can just draw on is fine. You can get a little more fancy if you want to, using something that's just a piece of paper and drawing out the shapes of your fields, or if you have an aquaponics system, maybe your beds. This is how we want to see this, though, essentially giving us some basic information. Noted on this particular one, and what you want to kind of identify on any map that you create, it's going to be your permanent water fixtures, if there are any. So if you've got a filter system, if there's a reservoir nearby, something like that, we want to see that on there. The arrows indicating which direction the water moves, and then again, the blocks, or you can, if it's all one field, just put one big field, just to kind of indicate for the auditor and for us, just a general sense of what your water system looks like. And what we actually have to have here is something that is an illustration of some sort. So a map, a photo, a drawing, any way you want to do it is fine. Doesn't, like I said, doesn't have to be fancy, but one of those things. Then when we get to the water risk assessment, this will be done in your risk assessment with your farm lead. Water is one of the topics that we'll go over. And again, this is really just going over potential physical, chemical, or biological hazards. When we talk about this with water, we're really thinking about what is your water source? So is there any potential hazard that comes along with that? For example, if you have surface water, potential physical hazards might be anything that comes down the ditch and maybe causes a problem if you're pulling off of a ditch. If it's chemical or biological, that could be things in the water. If you're on municipal water, typically these hazards are reduced, but you could have a situation where maybe the water isn't available for some reason. There's a water main break or something like that. So these are the types of things we want to be thinking about. And then, of course, as part of the risk assessment, what are your responses to potential hazards? What are you going to do? And then we'll also talk with you about whether water testing is needed. In most cases, if you are on anything except municipal water, you are going to have to test. We'll get to that a little bit more in depth in a second. The water management plan is the other piece that we will be writing in your farm plan. So taking all of this information, your water system description, the risk assessment, we will then kind of write a summary essentially of here's how the system is operating at your operation. Here are the things that could be potential hazards that we're watching out for and what we'll do based on the risk. And then if there's any water testing that's required, we will include that information very briefly in the water management plan. It might just say something like the system is a surface water source, and so water testing is required to be done 4 times a year. So when we talk about water testing, this is always an area that tends to generate questions. Testing is determined by the water source and your risk assessment. So generally speaking, like I said, if you're on municipal water, you're not going to need to test. That's what the Board of Water Supply does, and we will pull those documents. Anything else, we're going to look at some information coming from your risk assessment. For example, how are you watering your crop? Does it touch the edible portion? What are the potential hazards? And then current industry standards as well. So is this something that we're worried about the water touching? Is it a crop that's typically cooked and we don't have to, that's a kill step, we don't have to worry about it. So all these things will go into this discussion and figuring out whether or not your water testing needs to happen. If you are needing to do water testing, basically the point of this is just to show that the water quality is not a contamination risk. So again, municipal water sources are considered safe for both production and post-harvest. Well and surface water need to be tested. And here's a quick look at what the standard says. So you can see here, it says that water testing shall be part of the water management plan as directed by the risk assessment and current industry standards. And then when you see the little dot, again, that's a mandatory written procedure. And then it tells you a little bit more about it. So what we have to put in here is going to be things like the frequency of sampling, who's taking the sample, where is it taken, how is it collected, what type of test are we using, and what's the acceptance criteria. This is all information that we will put together with your help, so you don't have to worry about really all the details of this, other than if you are needing to do testing, it's probably going to be one of you guys or someone you designate on your team who will be taking the sample itself. And we'll help you guys with that if needed. So surface water, common in Hawaii on operations as the irrigation water or production water source. If you are in that category, you've got surface water for your production, you're going to have to test it quarterly. That's 4 times a year. The reason that we have to do it quarterly is because we have a year-round growing season. If you were in certain areas on the continent, perhaps you could get away with 3 times a year, but we're not so lucky. If you only have surface water at your site and you need water for post-harvest activities, you can treat your surface water to be able to use it for those activities. It has to be tested. We have to make sure that we are achieving clean water quality, microbially clean water, if that is the case. So that will probably be something that's a operation by operation decision. Maybe you are not even needing to do that. So we won't go too much into it right now, but we will talk about it with you individually if necessary. And then municipal water, if you have that at your operation, again, no need to test. What we will do is go to your Board of Water Supply website. We will pull the water quality report that they put out. They typically put that out in July once a year, and it's different by county. In Honolulu County, you have to put in your address. The other counties are by region on island. So in any case, we will find that and we will file it so you don't have to worry about it. And we will make sure every year that you're in the program that that information is updated and filed. So if you do have an audit with someone other than us, like a USDA auditor, that information will be filed in your Heavy Connect binder. And if you happen to be on a well, two different ways to look at this depending on your well. So if it's fully enclosed, which means it's covered and the water doesn't come out and sit somewhere, you only have to test once a year. If it's open, which means it's getting pulled from the well and maybe it sits in a reservoir or goes into the ditch, then it becomes basically surface water. And so that would trigger that quarterly testing. When we talk about water testing, oftentimes too, another question that comes up is what's the difference between what FSMA requires and what harmonized GAP requires? If you have paid attention to FSMA regulations over the years, you will know that they have gone back and forth on the water many, many times, and they have finally landed, I shouldn't say finally maybe, but they've landed for now on, they don't require testing under most conditions, which means that you have to do a very involved risk assessment to understand whether or not you should test your water. I think that's one thing that makes USDA harmonized GAP more robust than FSMA is it's a little bit more specific. Harmonized GAP, USDA, they say if you're on surface water, you're on well water, here's your testing that you should do and the frequency you should do it. So I feel like a little bit less wishy-washy than FSMA. If you are testing because of harmonized GAP, then you just continue doing that. And that testing, again, is going to be part of your risk assessment. So going through that is what's going to help us understand, okay, are you really needing to test? And then what is the corrective action you're going to use if your test falls in a range that is unacceptable? So what would that be? Funny enough, USDA and FSMA don't really say what that is. What everyone uses is the recreational water standard, and that's really because there is just not anything yet that's a better set of criteria or threshold. So the recreational water standard, we typically use the 126 CFUs per 100 mils, the geometric mean. When we look at a sample for your water quality, we will see what that number is. CFUs is colony forming units. You may also see it represented as MPN, which is mean probable number. In any case, when you get your water sample, that's what we're going to look at. And we really are going to be looking to see, typically it's going to be reported total coliforms and then generic E. coli. And that's what we want to know. Again, this is a recreational water standard. It does not mean necessarily that if you're using water for irrigation and it's outside of 126 CFUs, doesn't necessarily mean that you have. That is part of the discussion that we'll have in your risk assessment and look at what is your growing style? Does this water touch the edible portion of the crop? Does it touch it right before harvest? These are all things we'll take into consideration when we're looking at setting these thresholds. But harmonized GAP gives you the flexibility to set that threshold yourself. So you do not have to use the recreational water standard as your set of criteria. You can choose something else. We typically use it, but not in every case. If you are needing to test, the harmonized gap standard says that your water testing should be done at a lab that has GLP or Good Laboratory Practices status and or a proficiency testing program. In Hawaii, we are pretty limited with the number of labs that we have at our disposal in the first place, and they do not all have GLP. Most of them have proficiency testing programs, however. So we can direct you to a lab that can do your water test for you. We have agreements with a few of them to provide group GAP members with a small discount. So if you are choosing to have your water tested with one of those labs, you'll get a couple dollars off your testing. For pre-harvest water or that production water, again, you set the criteria yourself. So we will work with you on that, and you can determine whether or not you think that the recreational water standard is a good fit or not. However, post-harvest water, there is a specific criteria for that, and that is that it must meet drinking water standards and have no detectable E. coli in the sample. So when we have a situation where we are testing post-harvest water, and if you, again, have municipal water for that, we won't be worried about it. But if it's not that, something else, you're treating it, it does have to be tested. If you get a sample back that says that you have anything other than no detectable E. coli, you don't want to use that water for your post-harvest activities. Again, to achieve that water quality, you can add a sanitizing agent to your post-harvest water. Sometimes that will have to happen if you are bringing municipal water to your site. So in an example where a farm does not have access to municipal water, but they can bring it to the farm, we will add a sanitizing agent to that water just to be sure that the transfer of water into the container doesn't introduce any contaminants. So we want to just cover all of our bases.
Max had a question in the chat.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
He asked, is ACOS one of those labs? Is that how you say it?
Yes, ACOS. We do have tests. We do have some information from ACOS. I don't think that many of our group farmers are using them. We have the best relationship with Hawaii Food and Water Testing, which is Mandy Miner on the Big Island. She has supported us and farmers in this group for probably 5 or 6 years, and she gives a discount. The other one that we have had folks go to on Oahu is FQ Labs. I find them to be a little bit more expensive though. They do provide a discount, but I think Mandy's is the best way to go for now. So we can connect you with that. Go ahead.
What was the name of the lab on the Big Island, sir?
Hawaii Food and Water Testing. And I can connect you with Mandy. The other thing that we are trying to get going for farms that are on Kauai and Oahu, we have gotten some water testing equipment, and we are going to try to do that for just production water. We don't want to do it for the post-harvest water. We want to make sure that does go to a lab if necessary for that to be tested. But for the production water, we are going to do that ourselves. We are not a GLP status, and we don't have proficiency testing. But we believe that we can work around that criteria anyway, because we are using the Call Alert test, which is a FSMA approved water testing method. So we're going to give that a shot. And then if that works and we have successful audits without too much pushback from the auditors, we'll see if we can't expand that. But for now, on the Big Island, I would say go to Mandy at Hawaii Food and Water Testing. And then on Maui, you're going to have to ship out. So send it to Mandy. That's probably the best option. Any other questions at this point? Okay. Okay, so water treatment. Again, if we're treating water to meet the microbial criteria, meaning that we've got some kind of other than municipal water, and we want to use it for post-harvest, we have to meet that drinking water standard. We need to make sure that that treatment method is approved and effective. So that means we've got to look at the label and make sure that it is consistent. This use is consistent so that it actually says it is approved for use in water. And there's a number of things that are out there now for this, so we can help you find one that meets your needs, if this is the case. If this is happening and you do need to treat your water, then that triggers, of course, monitoring, because we need to make sure that that treatment is actually working and is effective. So we will create a procedure with you for monitoring that based on a frequency that seems reasonable. And again, goes back to the water risk assessment. What are we looking at? What are the contamination potential here? And we'll document that. And we can create logs for this purpose. Oftentimes in this situation, it's as simple as just using a test strip. So just checking the water every so often to make sure that it is, for example, if it's free chlorine, that it is appropriate ppm. So we'll figure that out with you guys individually if this is the case. If it's not, then no need to use any headspace worrying about it, but we will help you create a testing schedule and the written policy around this. And just a quick note on generic E. coli and total coliforms, because this is the information that you will see when you get your water quality report. Why do we look at these two things? Generic E. coli in particular, it is the indicator of fecal contamination. That's what, when FSMA water quality rules were written, that's what they were looking at, and that's what USDA GAP looks at as well. So the detection of E. coli in your water means there's possible E. coli contamination. There's a lot of different kinds of E. coli, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a scary one, but just shows that there has been some contamination in the water. E. coli is a type of coliform. You will see on your water quality test results total coliforms, which is a big, huge group of bacteria, and then you will see the specific generic E. coli. Coliforms are found all over the place. We hardly ever have a water sample that doesn't show total coliforms unless it's a treated or a municipal sample. They're in the soil, they're everywhere, so we can't hardly ever get away from them. But we provide those numbers are provided in the water sample readings. The one that we're most concerned with, though, is that generic E. coli, because that is the one that's very specific and tells us, yes, there may have been contamination of the water by fecal material. So kind of a recap here, production water, when we're thinking about our concerns around it, we're first thinking about the risk. So what are the risks with this water? That pathogens are in it, and then it may contaminate the product. And when we talk about this, we're going to really think about how is that water being applied, and where is it touching. Evaluating the risk. So what is the water source and the quality of that water? Again, surface water risk is higher because it is exposed, it's open. There are lots of things, especially if it's a ditch system, that can get into it as it makes its way to your particular farm. Application method of the water, timing of that, we'll take that into account. If the water is touching the edible portion of the crop, if it's applied, maybe in some cases, depending on the crop, you may stop watering well before harvest. So in that case, our concerns about water quality issues may be less. The less contact with the product, the better, right? So if you're doing drip, that's a wonderful scenario because it's probably not touching much of your crop. Flood, a little bit higher. Overhead, that's the highest risk. So overhead systems, we always want to see as microbially clean water, or as clean as we can get, because we don't want to increase that potential for contamination. If we have issues, then we want to think about how are we mitigating these risks? And this would, again, be part of that risk assessment conversation. A couple things that can be done, extending the time between water application and harvest. So that, again, is why we're asking, do you water all the way up to harvest? Do you turn off at a certain point in time? Also, what is going on in the environment? So if you are turning the water off, and there is some contamination in your water, perhaps there's an opportunity for that to dry out. And like we said in our first class, bacteria, they like water. They don't like to be dry. Exposure to sun, of course, can create die-off situation. Temperature, humidity, again, can also affect this. And then in some cases, you may have pathogens in the water that are going to get on your product, but over time with exposure to the sun and such, they might die out on their own, or there could be something else that comes along and feeds on them. The biggest thing here, though, to remember is that we want to prevent, right? We want to have good preventive measures because we don't always know how long a pathogen is going to be able to survive on the plant. So we want to just ideally try not to have it there in the first place. Post-harvest water and ice. So the recap here has to be microbially clean. So this absolutely cannot be a surface water or well water unless it is treated and or we know that water quality is microbially clean or drinking water standard. So we verified this by using a procedure and then checking how that procedure is effective. So again, if we're treating water, we're going to make sure that our chemical treatment is effective and labeled for that use. If we're using sanitizers, antimicrobials, et cetera, we're going to follow the label instructions because that's key to making sure that the chemical is effective, especially with respect to water. Sometimes pH and water temperature can affect the effectiveness of that. And then we're going to test to make sure that we are verifying the use of that product. So when it comes to your water system, one record that you will have to keep is a water delivery system assessment. This is a record that is going to be a little bit different frequency for everybody because it's really based on what your water system, your delivery system is, and what you've described to us in your risk assessment. So oftentimes we have folks who are completing this record quarterly, so every couple months or maybe twice a year. If you have a brand spanking new water delivery system, all your piping has been redone, everything's working perfectly, you could probably get away with just checking it once a year for a little while anyway. So this is a record in Heavy Connect, and all it's asking basically is that you can identify your water delivery system components and that you know that they are in good shape. Or if they're not in good shape, that you note that and take a picture. It's a series of yes and no questions. So a very, very simple log. And we will ask you in your farm plan creation how often you think you need to do this assessment or do this log. So again, it might be once a year, more likely twice a year or quarterly. In addition, if you have backflow preventers on your property, we are going to want to see an annual test if possible. Sometimes if you are leasing space, renting space, the landowner will take care of that, or the building owner, if you're in a building, will take care of that. So if this is applicable to you, we will work with you on trying to get a hold of that. I believe it is a Hawaii law. So it's something that's supposed to be done anyway. It's not in addition to, but again, we'll work with you to see if this is applicable to you or not. And oh yeah, go ahead, Max. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So are you required to have backflow preventers at every location where your irrigation is, flowing? We have like various places, hydrants where the water comes out and moved to various places. So would you be wanting to put a backflow preventer at everywhere there's a potential for backflow?
That hasn't been my experience with operations that we've worked with so far in the program. There hasn't been a set number or location where it has to be. We have worked with operations that have like one or maybe two, but that's about it. I can't think of anybody we've worked with so far that has had more than that.
Because not the long story, but so our water delivery system comes from a series of reservoirs that's managed by the state. So we have a backflow preventer immediately on the state side of our water meter.
Okay,
So basically, water from our farm isn't going to flow back into the reservoir.
right.
But I guess I was wondering, do you want, there's water in our pipes, constantly. So do you want backflow preventers at every hydrant to stop backflow from the fields into our pipes?
I don't think that's necessary. It's certainly not necessary for harmonized gap.
Okay.
All this asks for is if you have one, you should have documentation that it's been tested once a year and that it's working.
If you have one, meaning it's on your side, like your responsibility of, because
Right.
our irrigation guys are very clear, like anything on this side of the meter is your responsibility. Anything on this side of the meter is ours.
Right. So the backflow preventer in your situation is on the state side. Yeah, I would say we don't worry about it then. It's not under your control. So yay. Um, yeah, this one caused some issues for us when we first started doing this. But we've since figured out that if it applies, it's usually not that big of a deal, and we can usually get the test. The folks who do it have been pretty easy to work with, and we haven't had to do it that many times. So, but again, if it's on your property, yes. If it's somebody else's responsibility, I think you're good to go. We could try to ask the state for documentation, but I think as long as it's clear that the preventer is not on your parcel, then we can make that case that it's not your responsibility to have it.
Sorry, one more question about water.
Mhm.
Is there any is there any kind of like motivation for the state who delivers our water and manages these reservoirs to do this testing for us? And they would solve, like, there's about 50 different farms in our area that are on the same reservoir system. That means we're getting 200 tests a year,
Yep.
theoretically, instead of the state taking care of it for us and doing four. Do you guys ever work with them on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a couple years ago, I did pose that question, exactly that question, to ADC at the time, and this was years ago, so not the same folks who are there now. And basically, it was a very short conversation because they said that's not our Kuleana. And I was like, "Well, thanks. That's great." But I see what you're saying, and we agree with that. I think that it would definitely alleviate some of the testing for many folks who are on the same system. Whether it would be sufficient or not for USDA's purposes, I'm not sure because they like to see testing happening at the site, like where you're actually growing. But I feel like if the state could supply those, overall tests, maybe on a quarterly basis, potentially we could then in a risk assessment say, well, the state has done this testing regularly and the parameters are always met. And so we feel that the farmer doesn't have to test that frequently. I would want to make that argument and see if we could get USDA to accept it. Because I think that especially for small farmers, it makes a lot more sense. This is a financial burden to have to test all the time. That being said, right now, and hopefully for the foreseeable future, but we'll have to see, USDA does have a food safety reimbursement program. Once you receive your certification, there is an application you can fill out, and it covers up to 5 water tests. So keep your water test invoices if you have them. And if that program remains in place and continues to work, once you get your certification, we'll help you through that process of connecting you. It's Farm Service Agency guys who do it, and you can get reimbursed for that cost. So keep your fingers crossed that they'll keep that around. Okay, so speaking of the water delivery system assessment again, so just want to show you here is the information from the standard, and you'll see basically the requirement here is that your SOPs address the condition and maintenance of your system. So this is why we created this log, because the document required is a record and it is mandatory. So basically, again, you're just going to once a year, twice a year, maybe 3 times, 4 times a year, you're going to fill out this log and just say, yep, my system's in good shape, or no, I saw this and here's my corrective action. Very, very simple. And that's it. for water for today. So really quickly, homework stuff. Keep working on that sheet. Hopefully you guys have been in there. I haven't checked on y'all personally. Maybe Mia has, I don't know. But your field scope section completion is March 5th. So please get all that you can done by that date. And the reason is that that allows us to go in and start really working on these farm plans and filling in that information. If it's not done, then it just starts to delay the process. Maps, where it asks you for that, you can hand draw it. You can send us a Google Earth picture even by text because we can download that and put it in. So whatever works for you is totally fine. If you have any questions, of course, you know where to reach us. And then if it's applicable, we will work with you to set up your water sampling and testing schedule and give you the information for the lab that you want to use. I will definitely send those out. And I think that that's it. So it's question time or discussion time.
Could I ask a heavy connect question?
Absolutely.
So I'm meeting with like a heavy connect developer and Chess on Tuesday, and we're gonna try and see like what we can customize with stuff, but just some like minor stuff. Can we have like our option for each ore pound when the guys are doing a harvest log?
Ooh, I don't know. I will find out. I don't know if that's a drop down that we could create, but it might be.
You should be able to. They're pretty customizable. We have some farms that even do like clamshells, so they're
Mm.
putting it straight into the
Nice. Yeah.
clamshell
Yeah, we
and
would
they're
use
just
that
doing
too,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And then another one, it's like minor, but it's like we're always the grower. So for just trying to eliminate the amount of clicks that the guys are
Mm.
having to do, is it
Mhm.
possible that just growers automatically selected?
That's a good question. We'll find out. I mean, that's a question we haven't had yet.
And I'll just say one more. The other one is in our blocks, there's a set amount of like square footage.
Mhm.
So this is going to get into the math, and maybe that's where I'll ask the developer. But like, it would be nice if that was like preloaded. If you're saying you're planting X, crop, it just knows that like there's that much that's going to go into it. So that eliminates some of the,
Yep.
you know.
That I bet they could do. So preload the square foot or acreage. Okay. I would think that that would be possible. Because I think that that's how it was developed for those, much bigger operations like Driscoll's and stuff. So I think that that's possible, but I got it all down and we will make sure that we find out about that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. How's it going with Heavy Connect? You guys like it? So far it's user friendly?
Yeah, I would just say to Eric, we've been customizing our screen and that kind of stuff is we've done like from pounds to cases, all that stuff. It's totally doable.
Oh, sweet. Good. That's great. Thank you.
Awesome. It's the power of the network.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anything in your homework that you guys need help with or clarification on? Hopefully it's all going good.
For the reimbursement program, I normally send out a newsletter like every quarter. So you guys need to keep your eyes peeled for like reimbursement, and there's grants and stuff that I put in there for farmers. So
Yeah, we try to really get that information out to you guys. I know for the reimbursement from the folks who have done it in our program, it's very simple. If you are not already signed up with Farm Service Agency, that would be the first step. So we can connect you with that person on your respective island if you don't know who it is. And then it's really just filling out the application, any receipts that you have, such as your water quality test, if you have invoices. And the only other thing that they'll typically ask for is an invoice from us because we on your guys' invoice, we categorize your $1,000. We kind of break it down into three different categories. which we've done so that you guys can max out the reimbursement available. So we used to just have a flat $1,000 fee, but we realized that you guys could actually get more reimbursement if we separated it out. So when you have received your invoice and paid it, and you go to apply for the reimbursement, just let us know and we will give you an invoice that shows that you've paid in full. And then that way you'll have everything that you need. The folks that we know who have done it say that it typically lands in their bank account. It's direct deposited in very quickly. So keep your fingers crossed. I know that at the end of January was the last closing period for it for now. It will open up again though, and hopefully align with all of you guys getting your certification so that you can then go ahead and apply again. All right, well, if that's it for class today. We have class on Tuesday and then Thursday, no class next week. DEA will be hosting a worker protection standards training if you need it. The Zoom invite was sent out. If you need that again, just let me or Mia know and we'll send it out to you. You need it, Max?
I do. I was also going to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
So the reason I was late this morning, we had one of those unannounced FDA inspections today.
Oh my gosh.
Um, and yeah, so we spent a bunch of time. It turns out after going through all our filings, we're qualified exempt for the next year and a half, maybe. Um, but when we undergo a full inspection, is there any other than being part of Harmonized Gap, is there any specifics that you guys recommend we should be prepared for?
We actually have a little write-up that we created because we got to sit down with with a FSMA educator a few years ago. So I can send you guys that, which I'll note down, and maybe Mia, we can pull that together and send to the whole entire class. Our experience so far and this is only from folks who have been in our program and have talked to us about what their experiences have been. If you're, going through Harmonized Gap or have gotten the certification, it's pretty smooth sailing. And the biggest thing I think that folks have reported is they want to, of course, see your records and they want to see a harvest. And I think the folks that we most recently spoke with said that because they had everything together and organized for Harmonized Gap, it went a lot faster. The other thing I would note is that oftentimes the FSMA inspectors are folks who have a very strong background in microbiology, not so much in ag. So you may have to kind of explain to them, about, it's not a lab out there. So the opportunities for it to be perfectly clean and sanitized and no contamination is very low, right? So just, kind of go into it with that mindset that these are folks who are maybe not very savvy about agriculture, especially in Hawaii. Yeah. We've been hearing this a lot. I don't know why there's such an uptick. It's been growing over the last couple years, but this year seems to be they're particularly busy. Like we've had a number of farms who have reached out and said, "Oh, I got a FSMA inspection," or "The guy is trying to call me." I did hear that they finally, for good or for bad, put somebody on Oahu, an FDA inspector, which before we didn't have. It was somebody coming from the continent. So it might just be that now there's somebody local and they have the capacity to do a lot more. I will also send you, though, we have a little article that was written about the alignment of FSMA and Harmonized Gap, and basically supposed to kind of push out the idea that if you are Harmonized Gap certified, you're supposed to go to the bottom of the list for FSMA inspections. Like the idea was that they would be visiting farms who had no certification, right? Because those are the ones that are potentially more likely to cause a foodborne illness outbreak than the guys who are already certified. I don't know if that's really the case, but I'll send that article to you guys.
Max, did they just like somebody just like showed up and like like you weren't expecting it and they're just like identified themselves?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny. So they have tiers, I guess, of people that they want to talk to, and
Mhm.
I can't remember what the term is for it, but so you'll get an unannounced inspection if you've had like complaints or suspected of a foodborne illness, or you'll get an unannounced inspection if they haven't been able to reach you on the phone. So apparently, talking to these people, there's a farm with a very similar name to us on Maui that they were not able to get a hold of. And that's why we got this unannounced inspection. They showed up yesterday. I was out somewhere in the field when they called, so they weren't able to meet up, but they said we'll be here tomorrow. But had it been yes, yeah, it would have been like day of. They just show up and they want to see everything. Um, they mentioned the guy that's in Hawaii, but these two women were from California. Um, they're and if I mean if anyone wants to, hear about it, it was I I it seemed very much like they're not there to honestly, I don't know how much regulatory power the FDA has. Like, they're not going to get a warrant and tell you to stop doing whatever you're doing. Um, they're not going to shut you down. They're not trying to. But they're going to go over every single part of your operation, and make sure you're in compliance with FSMA for sure. I don't know how many of us are like what they call qualified exempt. I would suspect some, or if not most of us, would be. Um, And in that case, you have it's a 3-year chunk they're looking at. So for us, it was 2022, 2023, and 2024. In that 3-year chunk, um, if you fall under the qualified exempt status, they're not going to be it's got to be a 3-year rolling average of a certain amount of sales that you fall below, plus however more than 50% of those sales to what they call a qualified end user, which is basically anyone other than a wholesaler. And as long as you meet those provisions, you're probably not gonna see the FDA.
I think that's really key
So if
information.
mostly to if you're doing what I'm hearing is mostly like for us, the vast majority of our sales are direct to consumer. So that's more they're more interested in if you're wholesaling and it's getting out in a more broad way that's
That's right. So
their first line.
there's two parts of qualified exempt. One is that 51% of your sales be to a qualified end user. But two is that 3-year rolling average and whatever, like these inspectors were here for the 2022, 2023, 2024 chunk for us, but you've got to be under inflation adjusted 500,000 in revenue and 51% of your sales be to a qualified end user. So for 2025, that 500 is like 660 something. Um, and as long as you meet both of those requirements, you're gonna be qualified exempt, which basically means, as far as I can tell, they just come in and they want to do some math with you. Um, that was that was the that was pretty much all we did.
Yeah,
No,
I
thanks
think
for sharing. Yeah.
if you guys look back at, I think it was class one of the slides has that number, that inflation adjusted number, and it is like 660 some thousand for qualified exempt. The other thing I would say just to note is that if they do call you, it's not voluntary with FDA. You cannot put them off. We've had a few folks who have called us and said, "How do I tell them they can't come?" And we're like, "Well, that's not really a thing. If they call, you gotta meet up with them. If they do select you for an actual visit and inspection too, not just checking to see on your exempt status, but an inspection of your operation, it's a 2-day ordeal. They come and they spend a couple hours the first day, and then they'll go back, write up their notes and report, and then they'll come back the second day. So just so you guys know what to expect, it is spread out and yeah, over 2 days. So I'm glad it wasn't that for you though.
Well, it was about to be, and like they were pretty helpful. They said are you qualified exempt? I said, I don't think so. And he said, why don't we go in and have a look at your financials just to make sure? It turns out like,
Nice.
oh, that was a pretty fortunate 3-year chunk for us. So, um,
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's good. I'm really glad that there's some educators going around then because I think we need that here. We just haven't had as much exposure to what this is all about, maybe as some other states.
If it would help, I could send you in the lead up they sent an email that contained a pamphlet like what to expect during your FDA inspection. I could forward that to you and if you wanted to
Yeah.
send me. I don't think that's like privileged or anything.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Because I said we have been getting this year a lot of calls. I don't know why it is that, but they're going around quite a bit. So that would be really helpful.
If I get your email, I'll just forward you theirs.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you the Zoom, the WPS. Anybody else need the WPS Zoom invite? Brian, yeah? Okay. Got it.
WPS.
Yeah, there's on Thursday, Daya is going to do the worker protection standard training video.
Oh, okay. So instead of this class on Thursday, it'll be another one.
Yeah,
Yeah, certainly. I'm not
okay.
positive that I have it, so
Got it.
resend it if I don't. Yeah.
Okay, I will send it out. And she'll be doing those once a month for a couple months. So if something comes up Thursday and you cannot make it, no worries. There'll be a couple more. So class on Tuesday, WPS on Thursday, and then we will resume with the last couple classes after that. I will get some information out to you guys here in just a bit, but I think that's about it if everybody's good to go. Awesome. All right, guys.
All right.
Well,
Awesome. Thank you.
have a good weekend.
Thanks. Have a good week.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.